So here's another project that's really good for you to continue to build on your HTML and CSS skill set without worrying about JavaScript. Because I already know trying to learn HTML and CSS can be hard enough without adding JavaScript in the mix. So for this one, what we're going to build is a popover confirmation message where it's going to have a icon, a message, and a button. Now, in this one, we're not going to actually focus on the buttons that actually present the pop-up or actually dismiss the pop-up. We're simply just going to focus on the HTML and CSS. Now, with that being said, let's jump into the project. So here we are in the project. Now, the first thing I like to do anytime I get a new task or a project is to look at the design file and see what we're actually building. So if we head over to our design file, what we can see here is that we have a pop-up style element, which in the industry we call it a modal element. We call it a modal element. So what we have here is an icon, our message, and our dismiss button. Again, that we're not really going to implement the actual click event in this project. We're simply just going to focus on the actual just the HTML and CSS. So now let's head back over to our HTML file and actually jump into that. If you just quickly go back to our design file, let's see, how can we break this up? So for the most part, we can start from the top with our icon and then our message and then our button. But before we do that, let's create a actual container to house all of our elements, or a section for that matter. So here, what we can do is use the section tag, which will give us a little bit more semantic understanding of our element of what we're trying to build. And so with that, let's quickly add our class so we at least can know what we're adding. So let's just add thank you to the for our class for our section. Okay, let's go back to our mockup. Now that we have that, what's the next? What will be the next step? Next step will be this element right here. Now, earlier I hinted at it that this will just simply be an icon, and that's pretty much what we are going to do. We're going to just import an image for this element. Now, you could build this element with straight code, like so you can have the circle right here with an outline going around, and you have a check in the middle of that circle. However, that is a little bit complex in a sense that trying to create all of those different individual elements by ourselves can become a little complex. And if you take a little bit more, if you inspect this a little bit more, you can see that there's actually like a gradient color in the circle itself. Again, all of that can be built in code. However, a lot of times your designer would just simply provide this element to you as a image, because again, the designer might want this to be done a specific way, and sometimes you may not be able to create that in code, or it may take way too long to build it in code. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to just take an image that we already have. So if you navigate to the project folder and the asset images confirm icon, that right there, and if you look at that, there we go. That right there matches our design element also. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And so for that, to bring in any images into your HTML file, what you do is use the img tag to do that. Then we also are going to add our source for that. And for our source, we're going to simply use first, you do not want to add a trailing slash to that, because that would mean that it's an absolute path while we're looking for what it means is absolute path while we're looking for a relative path. And so we do that with asset. Now, if you use the VS Code, this will automatically autocomplete for you. That's why I recommend you use VS Code for this instead of using something else. While we also here, what we can do is also add the the class tag onto this. And so for that, since the image tag is inside our thank you section, let's add the thank you as a prefix to that, and then underscore icon. There we go. Almost forgot to add the in tag for our image. So now that we have that, it should be all nice and good to go. Now that we have something in place, let's look at our preview of that. As we can see, it does render our icon into our index HTML. So that's good. Now we're going to continue adding all of our elements first, and then once we have everything in place, then we can go back into our style and actually style it as we normally would. So, okay, now the next thing we're going to need to build out is the actual message for our modal popover confirmation element. So for that, now we can use a paragraph tag for that. Simple paragraph tag. However, to add a little bit more semantic meaning behind our data, let's use an H2 tag for that. We're not going to use an H1 because H1 we typically use for like the title or maybe like the branding of our page. And so since the thank you section will be a sub element of our page, we're going to just use a H2 tag for that. Now, instead of me typing out all of actual message, I'm going to just copy and paste it here. Now that we have that, just like we did with our image tag, let's add a class for this. Now we can call this same thing, thank you, as our prefix, since it is a child of our thank you section. And then from there, we can just add message, or we can just add title. But for this one, I'll just add title. Okay. Now if we save that and we head back to our preview, we can see that our message is rendering within our HTML, which means that we don't have any errors and it's good to go. So yeah, let's go back to our design. And the next step will be the actual button. So to do that, now to create a button, you can create a button in various different ways. You can use an anchor tag. You can use like a span and just style it up like you normally would a normal button. But again, for semantic reasons, we're gonna use the button tag. Now the button tag already comes with a lot of like pre-existing styling, which we're gonna have to change once we get to our CSS. But for now, we're gonna just use it as is. And so again, instead of me typing out the button title, I'm gonna just paste it. And just like our other elements of our thank you section, we're gonna add a class to this. And instead of adding button as part of our class name, we're gonna call it close. Now we don't want to add the button type in our class name, because we kind of, for the most part, want our class names to be type agnostic. Basically, we don't want to tie whatever element that it's attached to directly, like tightly couple the class name directly to whatever the element is attached to. Because like I said, a button could be an anchor tag. It can be, it could be a span. It could be a div. It could be anything. So that's why we don't necessarily want to tie that as a tight coupling to our elements. But for the most part, let's see. Let's save that and let's head out to our preview. As we can see, we have, for the most part, everything in place. We have our icon. We have the message, and we have the button. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now that we have all the semantic information in our HTML page, let's head to our CSS. Okay, let's just save that. Now, within the project template CSS file, you should already have the root defined with some variable color names in place, including the body with the font already set, and just and the main text color set, and a little bit of background, just to offset our element from the background so we actually can see it. Okay, now let's actually go back to our index file so we can grab all of our elements. So it was thank you. Let's see, what else do we have? Thank you icon. Let's see, what else do we have? We have the title and we have the close. Okay, dot title and dot close. There we go. Okay. Go back. Okay, so yeah, nothing has changed there. So now let's go back to our mockup. What do we need to do? What do we need to do to make our HTML information match our mockup? First thing first, let's look at the icon. Icon in our HTML file is a little bit too big. So let's actually add some constraints to that. Let's just add 120 pixels first to see how that looks. Okay, it looks better, but how close does it match? I think it still looks a little bit too big. So let's just set that a little bit smaller. Okay. Okay, that looks better. Definitely looks better. Now what we're going to need to do is center our, we do need to, the next thing will be to center our icon or pretty much all of our content to the middle. But before we do that, let's actually add a background color to our section so we can actually see. And we're actually going to want to use this white color for that. So let's do a var. Var is going to allow us to actually access our variables that we defined in our root element or root, a root element. Okay, let's go back to our preview. Okay, great. So the icon is a little bit smaller, and now we actually can see the background. And so as we can see, the whole background is our thank you section, and all of our content is being rendered to the left of our section. So to fix that, what we're going to want to do is go back to our thank you section again, since that's being the parent of all of our content. Let's use display dot flex. Okay, as soon as we put display dot flex, the display dot flex default is to render everything in a row. So that's why everything went from going down, straight down vertically in one column to now being rendered all in one line, in one horizontal line. So what we're going to want to do is go back to our display and just basically set the flex direction to column. Go back to our preview. Now everything is being rendered back into the one column. However, everything is being stretched. Now we don't want it to stretch, and so what we're going to want to do is basically set our item alignment to center, which is going to, there we go. So we have that. Next thing we can do is we can add a little bit of spacing between our content and then the edge of our container. So to do that, what we're going to want to do is use padding for that instead of margin. So yeah, the margin and padding are the two ways you can add like spacing around your elements. The padding being the outside spacing, and the padding being the inside spacing from within your container. Okay, so we're going to add padding for that. Now we're going to add padding for that. And so for this, we can just set a specific pixel for that. However, that means that even if we shrink our content, the padding will always be a constant element, a constant size. So we do not want that. What we want to do is make that more of like a percentage of that. Okay, so what we're going to do is set our padding as 5% for the top padding and our 6% for our left and right padding. It just makes it a little bit more cleaner. It's going to match a little bit more to what our design looks like. And so that's why we do two different types of padding. Two different percentages there. Okay, now that we have that, what we're going to want to do from here is start manipulating the corner radius of that. Because if you can see this corner, this actually has a corner radius. Yeah, so that has a nice corner radius around it. So let's just add border radius of 15 pixels. Let's look at that. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Nice corner radius. We probably can make it a little bit more rounder, but I think that looks pretty good. Okay. Now the next thing we're gonna want to do is, if you look at our message, you can see that it stretches pretty far from left to right. And so what we're going to want to do from there is actually add a width to our section, or at least a max width, because we don't care. We actually want it to shrink down, but we do not want it to grow past a certain size. And so if you look at so it actually did set the width. But to actually render it or actually see it, let's actually set it to like a smaller width. Come out to our preview. Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so it actually did set it. I guess my width was just a little bit too high to actually see it. But now that we can see that our entire section is now off to the left, it's actually being rendered to the left. So at least for the demonstration purposes, we kind of want our section to render in the middle. For now, what we're going to want to do is add another section that we're going to place our entire thank you section in, and add a class to this so we can actually target this within our CSS. Now, again, this won't typically be necessary, simply because because we're simply just using this for really for demonstration purposes here. Yeah, this is mostly for just demonstration purposes. This is not something that you would use, that you typically wouldn't use in your own demonstration. So no, this will be display flex. Okay. Then if you go back to our preview, Okay, so still didn't move it over yet. Oh yeah, okay, so yeah. One last thing. What we have to do is actually add another property called justify content, which will then actually move this over. Okay, yeah, there we go. Now that we have those two things, let's go back to our. So we actually could add a little bit more padding to the top of that to actually match our design a little bit more. But before we do that, let's actually continue to style the rest of our elements, specifically the message and the button. So let's go back to our style and head down to our thank you title. And then from there, let's just add the text align center. That's going to, move our text to the middle of our section instead of having it being off to the left. Okay. Looks good. And then from there, we need to actually change out. Okay, we're actually going to need to change out the weight of our actual text. We're probably going to actually need to change the size of that also. Yeah, since it is a little bit on the big side. So let's do font size for that. Let's try 18. See how that looks. Come back over here. We have to save with the. Okay, so I guess 18 is still a little bit too big. Okay, yeah, that brought it down a little bit more. Let's work on the weight of it. The weight being how thin and how bold the text will be. And so for that, let's try 400. Okay, great. 400 actually gave us, is that the correct? Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now, before we move on to the button, let's add a little bit of spacing between our element, between our icon and our actual button. So for that, we're actually going to use the margin for that, and we're actually going to put 14 pixels for that, and the 14 pixels. So the first one, if you only specify two numbers, the first one always represents the top and the bottom. The top and the bottom space, and this right here, and the last one will be for the left and right. So if we save that, come back over here. Okay, there we go. We added some spacing. However, that looks like that's a little bit too much spacing. So let's go for 20. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks a little bit better and actually seems to match our design even better. Now now that I'm looking at it, it seems like we need to actually shrink down our icon a little bit more, and we may need to add a little bit more padding. So let's go for 25. Let's go for 25, and you know why? Yeah, I think it does look bigger, simply because we're zoomed in so much. Typically, you wouldn't be zoomed in this much. Okay, yeah. Let me load this in a normal web browser just to get a sense of how it looks. Yeah, if you load this in a normal web browser, it will look a little bit. Will actually look a little bit too small. So let's actually, I'm gonna zoom back in for here and actually add the font weight or the font size back to 18 and reload it in my web browser. And yeah, if I load it directly in the web browser, it actually looks a little bit better. Okay, but yeah, I think our preview will be off because it is zoomed in so much when it comes to the VS Code. So let me actually see if I can load up a web browser so you guys can actually see what I'm referring to. Okay, so yeah, here's the actual HTML rendered in actual Chrome. So if you see right here, it's actually a little bit too small. Okay, set that to 40. Yeah, that gives us a little bit more spacing. So yeah, the preview is gonna always, it seems like the preview is gonna be off a little bit, but for the most part, once you render this out into our once we view our HTML in like actual Chrome browser that's not zoomed in, it should look a little bit better. Okay, so let's continue on down that path. So now that we have our icon title, let's move our way to the button. So when it comes to the button, like I mentioned earlier, the button already comes with a lot of like pre-existing style. And from there, what we're gonna have to do is kind of remove a lot of that styling. And so instead of me kind of like typing all of that out, I already have our styling off to the side a little bit. And so here we go. And so what we're gonna do is basically just set our background color to one of our colors, our predefined colors up here called nighttime sky. And then we are going to set the color of the text, which is the cloud whisper, which is going to map down to our white text. And then we're going to just set a border radius, set some padding between the text and the border edge, or the border edge, the font size, border, which is going to just remove like a little border outline, set the cursor to a pointer, and then set the font weight. So if we set that and we go back to our preview, there we go. It has actually removed a lot of the default styling and then add styling that we wanted. So if we just comment that out, come back to our preview, you can see all of the styling that comes pre-existing with the button, and then all of the styling that we've added to make the button the way we want it. Okay, that looks good. Now let's actually look at our confirmation within our browser. Let me see if I can move that so you guys can see it. There we go. So that looks pretty good. From here, what are we missing, or what do we need to change? I think what we can do is actually set our max width. We can actually set our max width back to 550. Yeah, I think we do need a little bit more padding. We're gonna need a little bit more padding between our edge and our element. So for that, the top and bottom padding looks pretty good, but we're gonna want to add a little bit more left and right padding. And so for that, let's just make it 10%. Save that. Let's take a look back at our browser. Okay, yeah, it pops it out a little bit more. From there, that does look a little bit like it's a little bit too much. Yeah. So I think 10% is a little bit too aggressive. Let's go back and add, let's try 8%. And let's see how that looks. Do a reload from the web browser. Okay. It still looks pretty aggressive. So let's actually just tweak this directly from our web browser. Okay, that looks actually a little bit. No, yeah, I guess that looks fine. I think it's actually probably the top and bottom percentages, which is probably throwing us off. Now, I would say to really dial this in, we really should be using media queries to do that. However, we're not going to cover that responsiveness in this video here. So for the most part, there you go. That's pretty much a very basic way of doing a modal style pop-up view. With that being said, I hope this video helped you kind of, build on a little bit more on your HTML and CSS knowledge. If this video was any helpful, remember to like, subscribe, do all of the standard stuff that you would do. If you like this, if you also like this, head down into the comment section and let me know. Or if this video was didn't really help you at all, again, go into the comment section and let me know also. And with that being said, I hope this video was helpful, and see you into the next video.